call the Brattleboro Planning Commission meeting to order. Today is Monday, May 1st. And the first order of business is to approve the minutes of April 3rd. Do we have anyone who'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we'll approve the minutes.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There you go. Okay, anyone have any announcements?
I have two announcements for you. The first is on Thursday, May 11th, the Safer Streets Community Forum. There'll be a Safer Streets Community Forum at the Green Street School Library from 5:30 to 7:30. I'll pass this around.
And who is this group? Is it related to like Molly Burke's legislation?
No, it's kind of a
Oh, AARP.
pseudo subcommittee.
It's supported by AARP, but it's a group of interested residents, Kathleen White, Alice Sharp, some people have been involved in traffic safety issues for a really long time, and enthusiastic about promoting bike and pedestrian activity.
Mm-hmm.
And
We helped
the
them last year.
first time they did this was last year.
I
Cool.
see that they're striping the roads. Are they adding a bike lane anywhere when they're striping?
I'm not aware of any new patterns, so they're just going to restripe it. It was ground off over the winter.
The other announcement is that Thursday, June 8th is the Downtown Historic Preservation Conference,
right.
which I had, it's going to be held in White River Junction, which I had sent out to you all, and I know Kathy and Liz expressed interest in going. If anybody else is, just let me know and we'll see what we can do. Are you still interested?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I have for
Yes.
announcements.
Anybody else?
Nope. Okay, so you want to tell us about the Brownfield program?
Public comments? No.
Oh.
Yeah, so just we have a new site that's submitted, so it was a good time to kind of have an update on the Brownfields program. And I think that I told you about this program, Jessica, and probably you as well, Sean. So if I haven't, you need to know what Brownfields are.
Oh, no, I'm familiar.
Okay, so this is, we have the EPA grants to do hazardous site assessment and petroleum site assessment. And so we're making progress on the hazardous site assessment. We have about $100,000 available. That actually, that's about accurate. As of late last week, well, I'll go through the sites, it might be a little bit less than that. And then petroleum assessment haven't been so successful kind of throughout the winter. I had conversations with some property owners who were interested in property, and it's kind of not gone anywhere. We had been kind of not reserving, but we had one site that we were targeting to do a fair amount of work on. And that was down on the waterfront, but because the state has different plans now, that's kind of fallen through, taking a right of way instead of taking property. So, gonna need to strategize and I guess get the word out. My EPA contact is gonna be in the area at the end of May, so we'll probably get together and strategize a little bit.
I'm sorry, did you say it had to be used up by a certain amount of time?
It's October 2018, so we've got about another year and a half for it. So.
And is there some sort of group of petroleum owning property owners that can be contacted so that they're aware that this exists?
What I want to do, I think, is target banks, because as commercial property is transacting, a lot of times they require a phase 1 environmental report, but there's a lot of times they'll just accept a certain type of phase 1
Instead of a
It
real
doesn't
one.
necessarily have the due diligence and all the protections that you get if you do the ASTM one. So, yeah, that's probably who I will contact. I'll probably partner with Wyndham Regional Commission to kind of do an outreach session to attorneys.
They have monies as well.
Yeah, and we've talked about joining together to do some sort of outreach geared
That's a
at
great idea.
attorneys, banks, real estate agents. I mean, we work with some realtors in the area that are constantly referring. But some
And
are better
maybe
than
the
others.
Housing Trust.
Yep, they're aware of the program. There is it's a little bit more difficult to use petroleum funds because they're looking at, so in order for us to use the funds on them, they need to go back to 2 property owners to see if they're viable or liable. So a lot of times you go back 1 property owner and it's been a company that owns the site, and so it can be a little tough to use those sites or use that fund
Interesting.
anyway. But not impossible. So, maybe it makes more, so we have a nomination for 48 Elm Street. That's the brick building on the corner of Elm and Platt Street. Recently, that site has there's been all sorts of environmental investigation done on that property. It's got PCBs and PAHs. There's been some remediation done on the soils outside of the building. Recently, they're looking to take down the newer additions. So you've got the nice brick part of the building, and then you've got a newer section. It's small, that's got concrete block. It's 2 stories.
This is this one you're talking about, the
Yes.
NYT one? Okay.
Mhm.
All right, 48 Elm Street, okay.
So they're just expanding on the investigations that have already been done for
Well,
the
they
youth
have
theater.
PCBs in the brick, and so they need to go into the federal TSCA program, and so they need some more work done to characterize it. So that's why they're coming to our program to kind of do the TSCA cleanup plan for solely taking down that newer concrete portion of the building that's closest to Flat Street. If you're familiar with the building.
There's a newer, closer to Flat Street, there's a 3-story cinder block extension to the old red brick building. It's about half the depth of the red brick building. It's got it forms almost like a tower. It's almost as,
It's big.
yeah, and that's.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a great idea.
So,
And the other one that is 56 Elm Street, which
Yes.
is the other one where they were taking that building down to make the amphitheater, right? Okay.
right, that's right next to it, that's the red kind of wood building.
Wooden building, the other side of it,
Yeah, it's got the pitch roof. Yep.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, they're eager to kind of bring that portion of the building down by the end of the year. There's been it's not in the best shape. There's some cones out there right now. There's been some roof issues.
Okey-dokey.
Alrighty.
So
Do you
what
need
do
us
you
to
need
vote
from
on
us?
it?
If I could have a motion, and there is this place for the property owner to sign off on. They submitted it to me electronically, so before I fill out, I'll need their actual signature before I hire a consultant.
Well, I'll make a motion that we nominate or
Accept.
Yeah.
accept 48 Elm Street and 100 Flat Street as within the Town of Brattleboro Brownfields program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
And so, the sites that we're still working on, 56 Elm Street, they need a corrective action plan. For that, 56 Elm Street is the outdoor amphitheater.
Mhm.
And they're pretty much done with it. Next Thursday, there's gonna be a public hearing, that's part of the process, in case people have questions. That's gonna be held at New Theater at 7 o'clock. And then the corrective action plan can be finalized. I think they're hoping to construct this summer. So, and they have DRB approval to have an outdoor kind of amphitheater in place. It's gonna be gated from Elm Street, for security purposes. There'll be some lighting, some patio. The reformer building is all complete. We entered that into the state's liability program, and we received a letter saying that everything's completed, a certificate of closure, so that's good. That'll be a success once it's been redeveloped, and we can report that out to the EPA. So it was quite a lot of work for no contamination, but the town has done its diligence, so we seem committed to that, which is good.
And then, do you know when they're, just out of curiosity, when they're gonna start redevelopment of the site? Like when the move would occur?
Do you know when the police station moved? I think they've started.
Construction is underway internally. I think it's expected that they'll be in place by late spring, early summer.
And then
It's not a
will
very, it's not a very
the,
complicated job. Sorry?
the state, are they gonna rent part of this space?
It's under negotiation.
Okay.
250 Burr Street, that's a property that's down on Whetstone Brook. You access it from Burr Street.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, I know, that's kind of silly. But I always think of Burr Street where the SD buildings are. So if you're
Right.
coming up
Right.
from the Elliott Street Bridge, you're going to take a right and kind of go down towards the Whetstone. It's the big 12-acre kind of banana-shaped parcel that we looked at in the charrette. So that property is, it's got pH contamination on, I would say probably 2/3 of the property, which there's about 1/3 of it as you kind of enter the property that's got it to depths of about 6 feet deep, so it's all within the surface to 6 feet deep. And then there's the next 1/3 of the site that has it in the first 2 feet, and then there's the furthest west portion of the property that is good. It doesn't have any hits that are above the soil screening values.
So is that from the fill? Like, did that come in with the fill and then the river moved it down or something in the storm? Like,
No, the property was filled before this, not just deposition from the storm, so.
yeah, no, I
is
know.
that
That's what I
you-
mean. Was it from that fill? Like, or you
Could've
don't know?
been.
Could have been.
It could have been, there was a sawmill activity, so it could have been from trucks kind of being on the property. There was a fire years ago, so it could have been from that.
Mm.
So it's hard to know exactly where it came from, but it's interesting that, 1/3 of it's got it 6 feet deep.
But so the remediation is is all that stuff will be
Well,
taken out or no?
But this is the tricky part. So you
Why
need
laughing?
to reduce the risk to humans. So the way that you do that is you either cover it over with about 2 feet of clean fill, or you remove it.
Yeah, got it.
But it's hazardous. It's contaminated. So you have to dispose of it properly. But this is a large site.
18 inches is the length of
This.
the child's arm.
Yeah.
So, and we want to do floodplain restoration here, so you want to remove soil. So the question is, where do you put it?
Is there a possibility for a mycological remediation project?
No, I'm not aware of that for PAHs. I know that you could do it with petroleum, but
But
I
not
haven't-
PAHs.
I don't know for sure.
Wouldn't that be
There's
fun?
two factors. I don't think there is for PAHs, and then the nature of the problem is that we're dealing with stone that's between 1.5 and 3 inches in size, that's being filled in over time with dust. This stuff that's, I think, is where the PAHs are, which is atmospheric and then localized stuff. So the junk off the bottom of the trucks, it's the sawdust, it's the oil and grease from the processes of the sawmill and hundreds of years of use and abuse. And so I think once you separate out the stone, which doesn't respond, is not contained in pHs and is not part of the problem from the dirt, it's just an incredibly expensive, difficult thing to do. It's just easier to shovel it up and move it somewhere. But actually, what do they say? It's $100 a yard to dump it.
Yeah.
And there's
Because you have to test it, so it's not just about moving it, but you have to test it to take it to a landfill or wherever it's going to be received.
it's about 3 or 4 acres. That's 6 feet deep. That's a lot of yards. It's
So one of the
thousands of
ways
yards.
that you can deal with PAHs is kind of move it on site and then protect the keep people away from it. So a lot of times you'll put contaminated, something like this, BAH, you'll kind of build a berm and then, either plant it or kind of make sure that people can't get to it. So that's a possibility here, to kind of put it at the toe of the slope.
Except it needs to be
Except
delineated.
There might
the
be a
other
wetland
thing
It
is,
might be a
there.
wetland.
isn't the point to provide flood storage, and you can't,
Right.
you need to excavate the soil to provide the flood storage.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, in the areas where it's most contaminated, or the depths are, it's deeper contaminated, is the areas where some of the town utilities are, the water line, the sewer line. So that would not necessarily be an area for excavation. So the engineers, the stream engineers, everybody's kind of working on it. It's an interesting puzzle. And we need to figure out if there's a wetland on site. So actually, that I had mentioned earlier when we were going over the budget, the wetland is going to be delineated tomorrow.
Yeah.
They'll be out doing site work on it tomorrow. Once we have that information, the conversation can be had. We can know what we can do with that wetland. If it maybe needs to be filled, then that conversation can be had. Maybe the mitigation is that you're expanding the floodplain and you'll be creating a bigger wetland somewhere else on site, but we can't really go much further. We can't get into the corrective action planning phase yet without knowing.
How or if use a wetland as a repository for the contaminated soil and gravel. And there's still a math problem of
How much?
how would, even if you do get permission to fill in a wetland, how much you can stuff into the wetland from this area. And I think that just roughly looking at it, the numbers kind of work against us.
Do these funds provide, this is just for planning?
Yes, just
And-
planning, not cleanup.
And would the EPA have any funds for the
cleanup.
removal of the soil and the cleanup?
Potentially. I mean, they do have a cleanup
Yeah.
fund
Because
program.
and they're also very supportive of the project.
Yes.
But Brownfields funding has been targeted. It's not a favorite.
By the
of
Orange
residents.
Man.
So-
Orange Man doesn't like Brownfields.
You have until September.
It's going to be challenging.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's still kind of a puzzle that we're working on, and we're scientists.
Yeah.
Experts.
So it needs,
Cast of thousands.
it needs the wetland delineated tomorrow. They'll be in the field tomorrow. Then
Who's doing that?
Mellon and McBroom, they've got an office in Connecticut and Waterbury.
And they've been working on the floodplain restoration piece of it. So.
Right. So once they've got that.
Were they part of that whole charrette thing? For the whetstone?
No. But Roy Schiff from Malone and McBroom and Waterbury has done work along the whetstone dating back to before Tropical Storm Irene, and has done work for Brattleboro Housing Authority, and a couple of years ago and again now to do with the demolition of Melrose, properties at Melrose, and has done some other work along with this for the state along the entire length of the whetstone from the town line to the Connecticut. I think he was part of the I'm blanking.
He's the beer.
He was part of the Veery team.
Beer, yeah.
So he's
He's kind of the go-to person for floodplain.
they model
restoration.
stream geomorphic. He's a modeler.
He's not just a wetland guy, he's a monster.
He's not a wetlands guy.
Oh.
He's having his people from Connecticut go and figure out the wetlands. That's not his thing.
Mhm.
His thing is river. He's a
Hydrology.
Hydrologist.
Yeah. And he models.
Awesome. Sexy.
Little modeling on the side, that's so nice. Yes.
That's my kind of modeling.
I don't even think Roy would be comfortable with that.
Be very modest.
Yeah. I'll let him know in the nicest
Okay.
possible way. Okay. so once that's done, then they can finish their kind of draft management plan. And then the DEC approval between the wetlands people and the floodplain people within the Department of Environmental Conservation, they'll have to resolve their differences or figure out which issue takes precedence before any kind of final design can be agreed to. And then whatever the final design is, that probably encounters some pretty serious cost issues. So yeah, away. So.
All right.
So the, sorry, did you?
Go ahead.
The ST Oregon complex, that is properties that Barbara George owns up there on Burr Street. She's going to be doing a corrective action plan, but as part of that, she needed to do some testing and close some water monitoring wells, which were eligible costs under our program. So they were out testing a playground, and today, I think, I saw the well closure monitoring report come across my desk today. So, so that's the additional work that's being done there. So that's where we're at. Like I said, we could use more sites, and I'm going to have to put some energy into work. I don't want to lose the money.
When did we get it? When did it start?
We started, it's been a year and a half.
Yep.
So we got it in
So-
October 20, we started the program in October 2015, yeah. So, and actually, as an aside, Ron and I are going to be presenting at a conference in Pittsburgh.
Actually, that's kind of an announcement. It'll be a while away. Yeah,
Yeah,
but yes.
in December, the annual it's held every 18 months, the Brownfield Conference.
Oh, that's
we
great.
submitted a session with Dennis Carmichael, who was the landscape architect on the charrette. So we're going to be presenting on that at the conference.
That's great.
In Pittsburgh in December, which is a lovely time of year to be in Pittsburgh.
I don't think Jessica agrees.
My sister went to college in Pittsburgh. Everybody loves
So will I.
Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Draft land use regulation changes are up next.
So this is our list that we kind of discussed with the DRB in, do you have it, Jessica?
Long time ago.
In January, yes. We let it sit and percolate with some other stuff. And so it's not complete. I haven't been able to work through everything, but there is some stuff to kind of go over. Some of it's just pretty easy.
Does this sheet include comments that the DRB made?
No, but I can remind you.
As we go through?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which brings us to the first one. And so, Jessica and Sean, were you on in January?
I was.
You were.
Yeah.
I think it was one
Oh
of
yeah, it was like your
It's
first
probably your first
meeting,
one.
right?
Yeah.
Or someone's
Yeah.
surprised
I think it was my first meeting too.
Yeah.
It's your chance, okay.
So,
Maybe there was candy at that first meeting too.
Oh, there definitely was.
Okay.
Late chocolates, I remember very clearly.
So it's still working, that's good.
so one of the issues was whether or not we should allow rooming or boarding houses as a conditional use. And actually, it wasn't very clear from that meeting whether or not, where the boards fell on that. It was clear that there was a concern about parking and whether or not, some of the residential neighborhood zoning district is dense, and so there was concern about the parking.
Well, when the Brooks house burned, there were a lot of single-room occupancy dwellings that were lost.
63.
There you go. I consider that a lot. And I think there must be demand for that in town, and it should probably be accommodated as a residential use.
Well, while Brooks House wasn't officially an SRO, I think that there are not too many other structures in town of that scale. And so for us, the issue or the question is more the streetscape than the scale question.
So Rod and I were talking about single room occupancies, because that's gonna come up here in a little bit.
Right.
This one, the rooming or boarding house came up in our office as people that own a single family home and, maybe have a couple of friends that, or maybe not friends, a couple of tenants that rent out rooms and, they share common areas of it, and wanting to make sure that that was okay with the land use regulations. So thinking of it more like that, but I think rooming and boarding houses, the DRB recently approved one on Canal Street, kind of near, is it Kresge's? It's
Yep.
right down the hill from the hospital.
Yep.
And that one, I mean,
Right.
there's several, people that are in transition, that, maybe need a room, need to get reestablished. So there's some of that going on as well. Which I guess could be like the Brooks House, but we'll talk about the single room occupancy as well. Those were probably efficiency apartments in there.
So then
So-
number one is not about single room occupancy?
No.
Number
No, it's
one
not.
is about something else?
Yes.
Right.
So maybe it would help if I defined.
Oh, yeah, we can define this. Well.
Rooming and boarding house is defined as one or more structures intended to provide accommodations operated primarily in private homes that will typically serve as the boarder's principal residence, that often serves a specific group or membership, for example, a fraternity or sorority house, club, worker housing, and that commonly includes meals, housekeeping, and or laundry services.
Yeah, right, sounds
I know,
good,
right?
doesn't it?
I don't know, any.
Yeah.
We're pretty specific on what a single room occupancy has to have in terms of,
But this is not it. I mean,
that's
Again,
not it.
this
So
is not
we
it.
see a single room occupancy more like, so it says it's more of a facility. It has to have a resident manager.
Right.
There has to be a common area on each floor that's at least 200 square feet, or 4 square feet per unit, whichever is greater. There
Well,
has to be laundry
which
facilities
one of
on
these-
each floor.
which one of these items are we discussing single room?
Jump in.
Down on, it's number 14, and kind of 15. So this is more, I think you could think of this as more of a single-family home that's kind of being used in a different way, where an SRO might be more of a facility.
So does this also sort of cover things like Airbnb, if a home's being used for an Airbnb, or is
There's
that?
a time.
It said uses similar to B&Bs.
Yes, we haven't been regulating Airbnbs.
And is this, it says use in the residential neighborhood, is that outside of the downtown district?
Yes,
Like-
it's,
In
any
it's like the
residential
whole
neighborhood?
area, like South Main to the high school, that's residential neighborhood. This all back in here, Oak Street, the Tree Streets,
The tree streets.
should have brought, Green Street, you can see.
So
What's this one?
basically outside of the quarter-mile walkable.
No, it's within
It's
the
within.
quarter mile. This is definitely within. Yeah.
Okay, so
It's the yellow
Yeah.
on here.
I
It's
would
definitely within the half mile too.
Yeah, I would be curious if we could say, put a line around the defined as walkable area and allow it in that portion and then not beyond that.
well,
That'd
I
be
think
tricky.
if you have a residential zone, you have the residential zone, and if it's good in any part of it, it has to be good for
Allowed in
the
any
rest
part
of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the DRB's concern? Is this, so figure 310 sets a minimum parking ratio of 2+1 per guest room. So is the idea being that if you are creating more boarding house situations, you would be requiring, or the minimum, the potential parking would be more because it's based on the number of guests?
Right, and so the concern is that, yeah, there's more people living in the boarding house, so you might need more parking spaces, and that some of the neighborhoods are very dense, so
To start with.
trying to accommodate those parking spaces on the property.
So could we assume that they would not get more parking spaces? Thereby, I could see a situation where probably many people who need something like this don't necessarily have a car.
I agree.
And if they did have a car, could it be like off-street parking? Could the handling of the car be dealt with in a different way where it's not automatically, like we're not automatically increasing the parking because of this? And also considering that probably all the residential areas are within walking distance, so.
I think there's different, like the one that took place on Canal Street, they actually, I think, only have parking for 2, and there may be 5 units or 5 rooms in there. But they were able to argue that the tenants in there will not have cars, and if they do, I mean, it is a distance from the parking garage, but
But
the
it's their
DRB
problem.
did approve that without additional parking. But I think the concern is you come in and get your permit and say, my tenant's not going to have parking, and then that room turns over and somebody comes in with a car, and then you don't have room to accommodate that car. And then it's a problem for the neighborhood.
Because somebody's parking there anyway, even though there's no spot, or like.
Because somebody's parking on the street and that interrupts the streetscape.
Not so much that they're parking on the street, because they won't be allowed to do that over the winter, but then it becomes, they're trying to cram into the property, they're parked on the front lawn, they're parked, just kind of.
Is there a regulation that if they were parked on the front lawn, they'd be prohibited from parking on the front lawn?
Currently there is, the way it's written, because
Yeah.
it says that they can't park between the buildings.
I mean, it sounds to me like there's like, if the physical parking is not there and the building owner is not making some change to actually accommodate the parking, then what they're doing is they're creating like a natural limitation for who would be living there. And then if someone has a car and they're that reliant on the car, they probably wouldn't live there. They would find a different situation. You know what I mean? Like, it's to me, like, I'm like, is there actually a problem?
I don't think so.
I mean, it's maybe an anticipated situation, but the DRB could waive the requirement to increase parking, right? And then it becomes the building owner and the tenant's problem,
And the
basically.
neighbor's-
Supply
That's the
demand.
problem.
Well, isn't that the purpose
Well,
of
but
a
where,
conditional
how
use?
does it become the neighbor's problem? That's why I'm not, like, if they're parking on the lawn, they shouldn't be doing that, and then that can be enforced against. If they're not, like, how does it become the neighbor's problem? That's what I'm not getting it.
It becomes a nuisance, and then we usually end up hearing about it. And then it,
Right, but isn't it a conditional use, and wouldn't one of the conditions of the conditional use be that they wouldn't get any more parking and they'd have to deal with it?
And then the result is that it slips, that dealing with it slips into parking everywhere, basically. Is that the impression? Or is that
I
the
think
case?
that's the concern of the DRB member, and I think that there are enough neighborhoods in town where that's already an issue.
Well,
Like
so
it
maybe
starts-
this is actually a parking enforcement problem. It has nothing to do with the zoning, right? Like, if we have rules about parking, why are people just parking anywhere? Like, if the nuisance is the fact that the enforcement is not being taken care of, isn't it?
I think part of the problem existing is that with these new land use regulations, I think we're more specific about where you can and you can't park and how much, kind of green space you need.
Right.
But previously that didn't exist, so there are lots of cases where people are just parking
Yeah.
everywhere. And then the landlord comes in and says, oh, we've got this parking problem, we really need to, pave this in the front to handle the parking problem. So, maybe over time it'll get cleaned up because the newer regulations are more specific, that would be a good thing. But I mean, I agree, it's conditional use, so it's kind of tied to a site plan. They're going before the DRB, they're tied to a site plan, and then that's easier to enforce that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a conditional use is for.
Right. So, I guess if it was an existing structure that didn't have very good existing landscaping in the front yard, for instance, then one of the site plan review requirements of the conditional use could be that they do something about the landscaping in the front yard, thus preventing somebody from sticking a car in there. It's the only way you can do it. If you allow enough flat space, if you can plant really nice grass, and then you know it's going to get a car in it. Like you have to actually build a barrier to put in a car in it. It's the only way to do it. It's possible that that would work. I mean, I can still see some limitations.
Let the
So-
record show that that silence is everyone thinking.
I just, as far as, where Brattleboro is going with walkability and all of that, I think that it would be sort of following this vision to allow this sort of thing to happen. And I guess also speaking from personal experience, I now live in a house that's got 3 bedrooms and 1 parking space. And we were thinking of renting to my friend who doesn't have a car either. And we only have 1 car. And she walks everywhere, and my husband walks everywhere, and it because Brattleboro is so walkable and lovely.
Yeah.
And doing this would just allow for more ease for homeowners to participate in that culture, and I think that's...
Yeah, I think the conditional use would allow people to be creative.
Yeah, I mean, that's my inclination as well. I feel like it's, there's not enough low-income housing, so having more creative opportunities where people maybe need a transitional situation.
Sean, do you have an opinion on this matter?
I see both sides. I definitely see.
Of course.
I see how without regulation, kind of just let naturally a supply demand that will end up being kind of creative, or some sort of creative arrangement could come out of that. But on the other hand, I can see a slide into people not following the original arrangement eventually, especially if there's a land owner or landlord turnover. So yeah, I see it both sides.
I wonder how this also fits into the parking vision for downtown Brattleboro. When I lived on Oak Street in our building, we had a tenant living there with us who had a permit for a parking space in the parking garage. And they walked down to the garage and got their car when they needed it. But I wonder if the parking study would take this change in regulation into account as they're determining need.
I'm sure Rod and Sue can make sure that they do.
You might have had an exceptionally motivated.
I don't think so.
Well, anecdotally, what we hear is that there are people who live really downtown who are willing to use the parking garage, particularly in winter. And there's other private off-street parking arrangements. There's one right here on Grove Street. There's another one on Oak Street. Greg Warden's place. There's a few others around. So there's definitely, kind of a market, and there's definitely a knowledge. People have knowledge of what the opportunities are. I think Sean's point is a good one, that over time, with a turnover in landlords and a turnover in residents, that you could get a situation that would be difficult to enforce. And this is not like Burlington, where there's a parking enforcement staff that's pretty sizable, somewhat typically for a college town of that size, and they enforce on side streets. Basically, the 3 people assigned to doing parking enforcement in Brattleboro just the enforce on public lots downtown, unless it's some really egregious thing like somebody parking their car across somebody's driveway or something, even that.
But this example here was at the DRB, where they regulated something and they allowed it. So why couldn't something like that continue?
I just wanted to point out in our regulations, we do allow, it says, you can reduce the amount of off-street parking required, including that for residential, if it finds that there is adequate on-street or public parking available within the quarter mile of the proposed development to meet all or a portion of the demand, which may have been how the Canal Street got permitted, because that could very well be within a quarter mile of garage.
Yeah.
So that
Okay,
does
so-
exist, which gives that nice kind of.
So
Yeah, everything from the
We're
corner
considering-
of Elm on Canal all the way back to parking garages within a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
we're considering this issue, and we've all voiced our pros and cons. And what are we doing now?
So what would happen is if you agree to make it as a conditional use in the residential neighborhood, we would put that forth as a proposed change to the land use regulations. There'll be planning commission public hearings, there'll be select board public hearings before anything got adopted, so that would be, these are little, what you have before you are meant to be little tweaks that we found working with the land use regulations, not kind of some
Well,
major.
I'm hearing 3.5. And 1.5 not.
Well, do you want us to formulate the amended language and then you can consider it? I mean, we've got
Sure,
other stuff.
it's pretty simple.
Yeah,
It's just gonna go into
It's
the
just-
table as a conditional
Yeah.
use.
It's not,
The
there's nothing,
residential.
yeah. So,
I'm
nothing-
fine with what Sue just read about
Right.
facilities in proximity and the flexibility that conditional use affords, and as many people stated, the need for housing of this site, of this type.
Okay, that's fine.
Is there some
Everyone
sort
all
of-
right with that?
Do you
Yes.
need motions or?
No, I don't think so at this time, because you'll see it before we.
Finally act on all of them. Okay, great.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the next one, we have a 16-foot high retaining wall limit throughout town, and there are some difficult properties to develop in the industrial zoning district, and one of the things that we did was get rid of the steep slopes requirement, so we're actually allowing development on some steeper slopes, but sometimes that requires a retaining wall, so there seemed to be a little bit of a conflict there. So what we're proposing now is that you could have a retaining wall over 16 feet in the industrial district. It still will need to be engineered. You can't just put one out, it has to be certified and stuff like that, but
Really engineered.
we think that it'll make the industrial lands,
A
when
go.
it goes, make it easier to develop them. And there's still plenty
So
of
is this
environmental-
overall throughout the town, or is
No,
it just
just
in
the
the
industrial.
industrial
Just the
zone?
industrial.
And
Industrial.
the industrial district is that just by exit 1 or is it also?
It's exit
on
1,
Putney Road?
there's some up exit 3, but the steep slopes are in the exit 1 area on probably both sides of Route 5.
Right.
That's kind of-
So not just the exit 1 industrial park, but there's an area that's zoned industrial now, just on the other side of Route 5.
And there's some industrial down Route 142.
And
Does
is-
anyone have any concerns?
Sure, any question?
I was wondering if any of that would be visible from Route 5 or the highway or 142 or.
It's conceivable, depending on which parcel got developed at exit 1, that you could see it from the interstate at the very peak of the hill, either as you're coming into Brattleboro or as you're leaving Brattleboro on 91.
And is the concern about
That's bad.
over 16 feet is like ew ugly or like what's the?
Who ugly, yeah, summarizes.
ugly?
Yeah, I think from a technical engineering standpoint, it's doable, but it's generally, that's 2 stories. 16 feet is already pretty close to 2 stories high. So as a part of the pedestrian streetscape or as a residential neighborhood, it begins to present aesthetic challenges and impacts the walkability.
And
But
also,
an industrial district doesn't have those questions
Right.
quite so
yeah,
much.
we also kind of wanted to grade
Minimize.
the land more naturally,
Right.
but kind of, so rather
Industrial
than steep cuts
zone.
and fills, kind of, rather than cutting and kind of working with the landscape. But
Right.
since we had already relaxed developing on steep slopes, it kind of,
There's a weird kind of topographical collision with the use for Exit 1 Industrial Park in particular. So it's very steep, it's ledgy, and difficult to develop, and industrial buildings and the surrounding park, the accessories to that building. So the industrial buildings need to be pretty big and need to be flat, single story. Factories or warehouses, and then they need plenty of room around them for 18-wheeler vehicles to drive around and back into and all those kinds of things. And you need parking spaces for workers. So these are all big flat space demands. And when you get to Exit 1 Industrial Park, it's like this. So it's like it's
So you're losing any space you would have to do a more graduated,
Right.
yeah.
And so yeah, you end up in a sort of a contest between the amount of room that you can give over to building a road or whatever that doesn't exceed the height limitations for a retaining wall, and you then confront the challenges of situating a large 10,000 square foot building on a flat piece of land which doesn't exist. So you end up filling and using retaining walls. And so
Well, from my understanding of the town plan and zoning regulations, fostering industrial uses in the industrial zone is a key point, and
Right.
we should accommodate it wherever we can.
So the proposed language is the change just adding except within the industrial district?
yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay, yes,
And to be
let's
clear,
do
I mean,
it.
there definitely are retaining walls that are greater than 16 feet in town in other zoning
We
districts.
have many
We
of
do
them.
allow maintenance of those and
Yeah.
replacement if needed, but
We
we just
try.
don't want
Right.
newly built ones.
Right, so
Okay.
the perfect example is the retaining wall on Green Street Extension that you can see from the Harmony lot. That's well over 16 feet, right?
Are we all good with that?
Yep.
Next.
I didn't get a chance to work on this stormwater, so we don't need maybe June.
Number 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 4.
Oh, the parking first.
It's another parking one. This
Sounds
is
tricky.
for the mini storage. And this is the one where, yeah, you can read the staff comment from January. So, what the 21st Century Land Development Code kind of recommends is this 4 spaces plus 2 for a manager's quarters if there's a manager's quarter on site. Because there ends up being a lot of space in front of individual units for cars to pull up, so we don't need
Yeah.
more parking spaces.
Well, this is just the sort of tweaking that this exercise is about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that seems fine.
We all good with that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next.
So this is the 4,000 square foot building footprint in the mixed-use district. I think we had talked about this in January as well and agreed that 6,000 would be, an increase to 6,000 square feet would allow some growth, because right now I think we set the 4,000 and that's kind of maintaining the development pattern. But one of the things that we've found is there's not necessarily, if you want a mixed-use building with office and residential or something, that can be kind of constraining.
How big is the grad center? This the square footage thing always I can't imagine
I
it.
don't know what the grad center is.
Oh, the Marlboro grad center. What would be the square footage of that size of building? Sorry, don't mean to.
That was really-
Oh, so that's huge.
Mhm.
Okay.
So these are still small. They're
Yeah. Okay.
not small, but
Yeah,
We
it's
good with
roughly-
this?
Yeah,
It's about a
that
4,000
seems
square
fine.
foot footprint, and it's 5 floors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone's nodding their head.
Yes.
That's helpful.
Okay.
So the next one here, this is probably something to talk about. Parking structure and surface parking are listed as uses, and the question came up as to whether or not they should be allowed in the institutional district. So the institutional district has our educational and healthcare campuses in it, for the most part. So Austin School, hospital,
SIT.
SIT. Actually, I think the retreat farm is in the institutional as well. So
Yep.
I can send around the map. And so that got us, Rod and I kind of felt like that any parking associated with those uses should be associated with those uses. We don't want somebody just coming in and putting in a surface parking lot or a parking garage for no reason. It should be, there's an expansion on that site and therefore it warrants parking, and then if you need that, it's accessory to the
Accessory
use.
use.
So we're not in favor of listing that in that zoning districts. But we had said in January that we would come back and evaluate what other zoning districts they were in. So, it's permitted, both of them are permitted in the urban center zoning district, which makes sense because we don't allow new on-site parking to be created by a private entity. So basically, we want to have the ability to go in and put a parking lot for, the parking system, or another parking garage if we ever needed it. In the village center, we allow surface parking lots. In the service center, we allow both, which we might want to discuss. In the neighborhood center, we allow both, which I'm personally a bit concerned about because we want that to be more pedestrian scaled, and so if you're going to allow a parking lot there or even a parking garage.
I don't see the market for it.
I don't think there is right now.
I mean,
if they ever
the
took off and there was some
likelihood-
growth, then we could always reevaluate it.
The likelihood of development in Brattleboro is one thing. The likelihood of someone developing a parking lot in Brattleboro is
Even another.
even more remote.
Right. What
So-
about these flying cars? You're not concerned about that?
No, I would be in favor of an airport if someone wanted to develop one.
And then in the industrial zoning district, we allow both parking garages and surface lots. And so that means they could be developed as standalone uses on a lot. I think that allows for some, sharing of, in an industrial campus or something, you could have multiple businesses using one lot.
Yeah.
Or
I think
structure.
Probably of these, the ones of greatest concern to me are probably the service center and the neighborhood center, because we're trying to push development closer to the road, parking behind. You could end up with, I think that probably the need for it right now doesn't exist, and so if we took them out of that,
I think
and
it'd have
then,
any impact.
I don't think it'd have an impact, and if we, all of a sudden, we're booming and there was a need for it.
Well, we did just change the conditional use for the residential.
Yeah. Right.
So the neighborhood center. But
So
I mean,
you're
there is
proposing
one-
to do what this second paragraph says, have it, keeping it as an accessory use?
And institutional.
Yeah, so we'll make no change
Institutional.
to the institutional.
Mm-hmm.
The
And then
only
which
place-
And then
ones?
removing it from neighborhood center?
Well, now that I'm thinking out loud, the hospital has an off-site parking lot in the neighborhood center.
Yes, they do.
It does.
So
Maybe that's how
that could be how
we ended up with this.
Which is very necessary and useful.
It is necessary. I'm not
It's
sure how useful
underutilized.
it is. It's probably underutilized.
dramatically underutilized.
Oh, really?
They can't bribe the staff to use it.
But it's probably necessary.
They've tried that and it failed.
Could be like United, the bribes need to be larger.
Well, I thought you were going to suggest some beatings, but
Whatever works.
Yeah, you could offer that as well.
do
Yeah.
you have any recommendations on the changes that
So you just, yeah, you just want to trash
You'd
this
like
one and
us to
forget about
consider
it, or
here?
keep sitting on it for a while to think, see if.
Tell us what you want. What you really, really want.
I think in the service center, I think it should be out.
Yes.
I don't think we need either standalone surface lots or parking garages.
I don't know what service center is.
Yeah.
That's Putney Road,
Putney Road.
Hannaford's.
Mhm.
So I think it's Chickering or Technology Drive, all the way up to
Yeah.
CNS.
I think it's such a low probability, it doesn't really matter in a funny kind of way, but if we're gonna go through and clean up things, it's just a silly thing to leave in there. And I think if something really dramatic happened along Putney Road and we needed to think about accommodating thousands of extra workers and residents, we'd get our head around the hard construction part.
Yeah.
But it's not imminent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's not imminent in the neighborhood center either,
Either.
but I guess, if there is a possibility that maybe you would locate for an employer. I mean, there is the schools.
I was just gonna
there's
say,
the,
between the hospital and the schools in the lower neighborhood center on Canal Street, there's a possibility that you'd end up depending on off-street lots,
I know.
off-site lots.
Are these aren't public parking lots, these are
It could be.
independently
It
It could
owned.
be. I mean, that's why it's there in the urban center, because they
Right.
are public parking lots.
Sometimes they're
so-
for public patrons and sometimes they're for employees, like at the hospital.
Would taking that out of the service center discourage development in that area?
No, because they will have an expectation pretty high expectation already about the proximity of the parking to the.
Yeah. They all want their own parking.
Yeah,
Of course.
Okay, so you're proposing to just eliminate the service center parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
And
Unless
not the parking
there's-
structures for neighborhood centers?
No, I think we should keep this parking structure.
Yeah, yes, because
Splitting it up.
it's conceivable.
Conceivable for the hospital
Yeah.
to want to put in a structured parking.
Right.
Might make it more appetizing for employees to use.
Yeah, keep the snow off the cars.
That's very appetizing.
Oh. 7 is unfinished, so Brian and I
We're
were
gonna
going
skip
back and
that.
forth. Yeah.
Okay, number 8.
This is the one
Yeah.
about, there's other types of structures that are similar to garages and sheds that are not explicitly exempt. So they need a zoning permit, but the setbacks are reduced, so I shouldn't say exempt. So I proposed a wording change. That would be sheds, workshops, artist studios, and other one-story detached accessory structures not used for human habitation.
Okay.
It's the setback from the
If somebody, if somebody wants
adjacent
to build
property.
it.
An art
Yes,
studio or something.
right, so
on
these
the
are
property.
things that you reduce the side and the rear setback. So if you wanted to have human habitation, then you just have to comply. If it's possible you could do it, you're just gonna have the greater setback,
Mhm.
so. This allows.
So
for uses.
this proposal reduces the setbacks for these structures.
Well,
Makes them consistent with garages and
and
sheds.
sheds.
And
So you can have your
garages and
studio
sheds
next
are
to-
reduced.
Yes, they
Yes.
can be 5 feet from the side property
Right.
line and rear, I think, too.
The one issue that I can see here is that if you allow, we've got the problem now, but if you allow for somebody to build a nice 2-car garage and it's got a gable roof and enough room upstairs to build the dormer room, then at some point they want to put an apartment above the 2-car garage. If you allow them to build it within the setback, you're going to turn around and say, no, you can't do that.
Wait, garages are treated separately.
Okay. But you know how we do,
It would become
It says
a
other
habitable.
one story detached.
Oh, that's true. It does.
So
what's
if
that?
It says 1 story.
Right.
does
Let me pull
specify
up
one story.
the
I don't know if
full-
that
Well,
Well,
works.
actually, I identified a funny problem about what would happen if you permitted a garage 1 year that was within 5 feet of the boundary line, and then they came back 2 years later and said they wanted to put an apartment in the upstairs of the
Or number
garage.
8.
But
You
that
have
would be
to-
a 2-story garage, right?
Well, Well, I could get.
Yeah. Actually, 200 square feet's not a very big garage.
No, so that's why they're separate. In the list
Right.
of structures with reduced
Okay, I think
setbacks,
we've solved this problem.
garages or carports
Carports.
attached and detached can be within 5 foot of the rear setback or side setback. Sheds with a maximum of 200 square foot footprint each, same, but they're listed separately. So I think a
Right.
garage
Right.
can also be up to 35 feet, where these structures can be 15 feet. So I'd probably get rid of the 1 story, and I would,
Substitute feet.
because it already exists in the
Wait,
table. So I'm
so
proposing
you're
a
saying
change.
not 5 feet, but 15 feet?
No, 5.
Okay, so where did the 15 feet come from?
Where did I say that? Oh, they have to be maximum height.
Oh, height.
15 feet.
Right.
So it could read sheds, workshops, artist studios, and other accessory structures not used for human habitation.
Right. And a single car garage is 200 square feet.
Okay. We all good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Yep.
That would be actually on the short side.
9
No.
didn't get a chance to work on. It's June.
Skip that. 10?
Coverage for service center, we had it at 60% coverage, and we bumped up against this in a couple of applications. It seemed kind of low, doing some research. For the type of district it is, 70% seems reasonable, so we were suggesting an increase.
Yeah. But the rest of it is required landscaping?
Green space, it can be landscaping, it can be stormwater management.
Yeah. Most of the service center properties are probably 100%
Well, we-
paved at this point, right?
At least 90%. That's what
Yeah.
the old regulations used to allow, 90%, so
Mhm.
So that's
it
what
was a
we've
lot
got.
of paved, poor landscaping.
Right.
Poor, conventional stormwater treatment.
And you want to go to 70 and not like 80? I mean, is it realistic to get people to do 70? Will people do 70?
Yeah. I think
Okay,
so.
great.
I mean, O'Reilly's came forward and they were gonna do 65. I mean, most of the applications that we saw for Putney Road were needing a waiver to get a little bit, to push
Still
up
go a little
against
bit,
it,
right.
so.
Okay, great. So
we
70.
think 70 is
Reasonable.
reasonable.
You guys
Okay.
good with that?
Yes.
It's much more blacktop than 70, and you're not making enough progress towards treating stormwater and so forth on site. So,
Right.
Can I ask a random question, sort of? Does that, so that's ground level landscaping coverage? Does that not include, say, a building with a roof garden or roof
Right.
landscaping?
Mhm.
Is that not included in that?
That would not be included in it. That's something to consider in the next round. Actually, that workshop that we went to in Hinsdale, was it something like effective land use?
Mhm.
Which would be that you could count those spaces and basically, yeah, there was some calculation that if you're doing certain things, that was actually included.
I think usually things like that only come into play when it's a very urban area. I know that I worked on a lot of casino development in Atlantic City that had a requirement, and also in Hudson County, New Jersey, if it was very dense, they'd have a requirement. It wasn't so much for stormwater, but it was because so that other high-rises, when they looked out, would see
Would have green
a
space.
landscaped or a gravel roof that was more attractive than a bare roof.
With HVAC stuff hanging off.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's interesting.
So, I guess, so say CNS decides that they want to build a new building, and we give them grief about how much impervious surface they've got, and they propose to have a green roof on this new building.
Sounds like something they would do.
It's just so then. Then I think we would waive, they could just apply for a waiver, and, I think we would.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
It's a
know that
little
we really
weird.
have the tools in this, but
Yeah.
I know that I've seen regulations that attempt to address that.
Right. I
But
think-
not this time around, maybe next time.
I think the next time, I think it's something that we'd probably want to.
This is such a change.
You must need
to
like a
the
little
service
demand
area
for it,
zone
right? Like it would
that I
have to
think
be a
has
little more.
gradual.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
It could work well in the Putney Road area, but I think we need to make sure our stormwater is in the right place before then we attempt to let them have more impervious surfaces and count other areas towards the.
I think Liz's point is developers will do that when the land value is so high that coming up with some other kind of arrangement, like a very expensive roof, is worth it. And
Right.
you know, if you see an S and you're like, well, I don't think so, you know, you just go to Chesterfield or something and do whatever you want. So it's just not, there's not enough pressure, there's not enough density and pressure on the land, available land, to really make green roofs or something like that a viable solution, which is not to say they're not a good idea, it's just, it's not, you know, it's just something that you can work your way around with the
And this
site.
is a big change.
It's a huge change.
This is a huge change for people to wrap their heads around. I would think it would be taken in stages.
Okey-dokey.
Next.
11, there was a concern that the non-residential floor area ratio, which is how you measure density, in the residential neighborhood was low. And I think we feel that, you know, we were very intentional in creating, in trying to reinforce the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhoods as being residential, and we didn't want to see a ton of non-residential uses bleed into that area, because we wanted to preserve these nice neighborhoods. So we're not proposing a change at this time. It was one that somebody else had suggested, and right now,
Okay, sounds good.
feeling okay with what we have. 12. Since we've had the land use regulations, there's been several really large parking lots that have been resurfaced or regraded, and we realized that these were missed opportunities to improve stormwater and maybe reduce some of the imperviousness and bring them into compliance with the land use regulations. So what I have here is kind of a proposal of how we could address it. Right now, you know, we don't require somebody to come in and get a permit or go through site plan review for, you know, major changes to a parking lot. So this is one that I've seen. I mean, you could do it at resurfacing, when they restripe, especially if they're making a change to the configuration of drive aisles and the number of parking spaces. That should be a trigger anyway, but we're just being a bit more explicit. If you're adding parking, you need to come in and get new site plan review if you're a commercial property. Definitely the regrading. That's a good time to make improvement. And if you're, again, D, also the landscaping. I mean, if you're changing any of the landscaping, you should be coming in for site plan review anyway. But this would be a change if you were in to resurface or to regrade. It's not something we've required before.
So how does this relate to number 10 that we just discussed? Or does it? Would they then have to comply with that new?
No, they wouldn't have to change the coverage. They wouldn't have to reduce. They would probably they might have to add landscaping. They might need to
Take out curbs or put in like a bioretention. I mean, there's a lot of creative things you can do.
Yeah. You know, Hannaford's did a pretty major,
They resurfaced a really large area.
yeah, and, you know,
Did nothing.
Yeah.
I like it.
that's kind of where it came from.
Kathy says,
That was
ding,
one of
ding,
the
ding.
other others.
I like
the
it.
only ones.
Because it's shiny.
Hmm?
Because it's shiny.
Is it shiny?
Yeah, because it is shiny.
I like it.
No, I wasn't just talking about the Hannaford's parking lot. I'm just talking about
No, I'm not
this.
talking about the Hannaford parking lot. I'm talking about this. Oh, good God, Rod. Don't you know me by now?
I like the next one.
Drive-through?
Are we,
Is that?
did I just
think we'll put that
monopolize the
forward.
decision on that one, or
Apparently,
is
yeah.
everyone okay with
I
that?
was thinking that you're a fan of shiny
Good with
blacktop.
that.
No.
No?
We'll give you this one, Kathy.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
you can have that one, all right?
So, Jessica,
Drive
like-
through.
I'm good
It's
to
gonna
monopolize
smell.
this one. I think we
Drive,
should
though.
definitely make this change.
Yeah, okay, fix that. Yeah, that's good. You really need, do we really need, like, I guess you do have to actually warn that or
I'm
whatever.
not sure that you do. I actually think that we could, the typos we could probably fix.
I think you should have a question mark after though.
Drive though?
Drive, though.
Exactly. It goes into this vision of Brattleboro being a walkable. city.
That's right. You just have drive
Drive though?
Drive though?
No, walk.
Yeah, right.
Um,
That would be the Portlandia solution to that.
Okay, so 13?
14.
14.
We're done with.
Yeah, we're moving on to a density question again, oddly enough.
Density, this is the single room occupancy, this is where they come back up. So, there was concern with the single room occupancy that if we calculated it using the floor area ratio, then it would limit the usefulness in the mixed-use zoning districts because it's a low floor area ratio. So I had done some research back in January and found that there are places that say, well, 4 single room occupancies equal 1 dwelling unit. So that was something we could consider. But on second thought, I got to thinking about what is a single room occupancy? And basically they're a pretty urban use. They came, out of New York City and Chicago and San Francisco, conversions of hotels into single room occupancies. At one point, Housing and Urban Development had a funding assistance for single room occupancies. Now I think it just falls under their multifamily housing. But they're not really, I think it's more of the rooming and boarding house that are intended for, home conversions. So our mixed-use zoning district, it's along Canal Street, it's I think a little bit along Frost Street, Flat Street. I don't think that we barracks, shelters, that kind of thing. They're kind of lodging uses. They're, a shelter is not, some shelters, a family shelter might have individual units, but for the most part, an emergency shelter isn't going to have independent bathrooms and kitchens. So we think the intent was for it to be measured under floor area ratio, and we should just make that clear.
Yeah.
Okay. We all
Sounds
go with that?
reasonable.
Very good.
I'm going to leave signs.
Yeah, we're gonna leave signs.
Skip.
Longer.
It's like getting more
Playing with
complicated.
the Supreme Court. So
Okay, so we'll take this up again next month and
Yeah.
finish it up?
Oh, is 17, is that just a typographical edit? Yeah, just, that's fine.
All right, downtown master plan.
Okay, so just a sort of an update, I'm not sure, we gave you an update last time, so we have been discussing the contract to do the downtown parking study with the consulting firm, Wilson & Associates, out of New York City and Boston. And at the next select board meeting, there'll be an action item to approve and appropriate, accept and appropriate the grant so that we can go under contract with them. We had a brief discussion with the consultant via phone last week, and just because things were slow getting started, he's going to start the work in summer, but basically take August off so that once everyone is back at work and school, he can interview people and work with people around Brattleboro's parking questions when we're back up at full speed.
That's logical.
So this
There's
is
two-
tomorrow's meeting? Tomorrow night
No.
select board meeting?
No, the next one, sorry.
the 6th.
May 16th.
16th. So there's 2 public meetings with it, and there's a bunch of kind of stakeholder interviews that he'll be doing, as well as Couts. So basically we pushed a public meeting out of August
To
into September.
September.
So
That's
to
why.
avoid
Yeah.
the summer doldrums.
Right.
So.
Right.
But there will probably be a public meeting in July, which
Yeah.
he was less concerned about.
And do you need us for anything at this point?
We'll probably have more information in June.
When we get closer, yeah. And the particular consultant that we went with has a highly automated system for data collection. There was other applicants or respondents to the RFP where we would have perhaps been looking for volunteers to do traffic count, car counts.
I'd be interested to see what kind of information the parking meters have. Didn't we talked about that?
They have a surprising amount of information, and this guy is familiar with this model parking meter and the guy that runs the business that installs them. So he's fairly confident that he can extract a lot of information from it. But he's going to use a drone and license plate readers attached to a car to collect data. So it's somewhat automated.
Wait till the drone hits Brattleboro.
Actually, we are looking forward to it. We look very much like one of our own.
One of there is a steering
To go to the
committee
lunch
that
and
will
things.
kind of be a sounding board for some of the work. So that's something that we're going to need to think about setting up. So maybe the
Yeah.
June meeting.
Yeah, I think so. So that was just a bit of background where we're at with one of the other components of the downtown master plan. So tonight, what I wanted to do was actually discuss briefly a bunch of different spaces that we have. And we've got a couple of maps here.
Yeah, we need to share.
And the idea is that, first of all, I wanted to just sort of lead off with a discussion about the relationship, if you like, between the built form and the streetscape and public amenity. There's a lot more interest and focus on what people would term animating public spaces in the planning world now than there was, say, 10 or 20 years ago. And there's more concern or interest in what constitutes appropriate activities in public spaces, and there's a whole bunch of academic material around how we identify and use and measure public space, and even what the interplay is between the space the public can see and use that is genuinely public, perhaps like the sidewalk and the street, versus the little landscaped area in front of KeyBank, which belongs to KeyBank, the building, and is clearly intended to be public space.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can sit on it. You don't have to be a customer of KeyBank or a tenant of that building to sit there. So it conforms to a version of public space that we're probably more familiar with seeing in large cities, but it's not anything that we really control for or insist upon. There's some language in the land use regulations now that would encourage that kind of private development, if you like, of public space. It raises some interesting questions about management of it. It comes up in other different ways to some extent around, say, the co-op parking lot and the uses it gets put to. And part of the co-op parking lot abuts up to a public walkway, and the distinction between the public walkway and the co-op parking lot, which is private, is not, it's not very obvious or very well enforced. It's not that you want to enforce it, but it's unclear to people where the public activity begins and ends relative to the private use, which is the co-op parking lot. And then, so the things I'm encouraging people here to think about are, what are the kinds of uses that we put open space or public spaces to in downtown? So it's a pretty broad range. So if you come into downtown or walk through downtown some evenings, particularly in the warmer months, you'll see people protesting outside here at the Wells Fountain outside the courthouse. Sometimes you see particularly Quakers standing silently outside the post office on Saturday morning. Sometimes you'll see, I'm not sure what you refer to them as, people yelling the Bible at you at Plenty Park, which is another use of public space. So we've got these sort of less common activities, or activities that might escape our attention, compared to things like people sitting outside the works on the sidewalk, or Amy's, so the cafe culture, or something a little bit more tied to commercial activity. But the whole idea of people feeling comfortable about walking or riding in the downtown, and then also using public spaces as gathering places and meeting places to enact their civil roles, is what I'm trying to get at here. So I thought if we started at the top, like as in the north, and worked our way to the south, we could look at the well-known public spaces, whether they're privately held or owned by the town or some other public institution, and think about how effective those spaces are, what uses they get put to now, what uses they might be suited to that they're not getting used now. And then I don't want this exercise to take very long. I just wanted to get people's initial reactions, and then to get you to think about the range of possible spaces and range of possible activities that might go with it. So the first one will be at the north end, which is the Commons,
Which is actually off the map.
which is slightly off the map, which I've been noticing for a while now. So if you can use your imagination, over the road from the top of this map is the area known as the Commons, otherwise also thought of as a dog walk. So it gets used sometimes in spring and summer it can be rented. And so private entities, like I think the one
Groundworks is having that camping thing.
Right, Brownfields is having a camping thing. I don't think they're paying anything to rent it, but
The kids' fair is there.
Yeah, the kids' fair.
That's
which is
awesome.
that's right, which is just awesome. Which River Valley Credit Union,
Strolling
I
of the
think.
Heifers
Yeah, and
is
Strolling of the
also-
Heifers does it. So yeah, so depending on the organization and depending on the intensity of the use, the town, you can rent it from the town. It's got power in their little gazebo. It's got minimal facilities. It's frequent that with bigger events, porta potties and those kinds of things are parked there. But in general, outside those events, what do people think it gets used for, or what do people see happening there, or how effective do people on the commission think this is as public space?
I think it's fantastic. But of course, I lived around there.
You
Nice
okay.
cherry blossoms there right now.
There are nice cherry blossoms there today. Yeah.
I'd say it's probably underutilized.
Yeah.
I mean, we have those couple of big events, but I don't, it's not like a go-to in my mind for like going to sit and like have a picnic or
Right.
hang out or take the kids to play. You know what I mean? It's sort of.
See, I feel differently because I was right around the corner from it. It was like our neighborhood park where
That's
you
cool.
go to
Yeah,
walk the
there's
dog, you go
concerts
to
there.
play frisbee. There's a weekly concert in the summer. There's weddings there. I did a pop-up theater performance there one time.
That's good.
Yeah, and I see a lot of folks running through there and taking walks and sitting on the benches, and a lot of homeless folks in the summer
Mhm.
utilize the benches
Mhm.
and the gazebo. And
I don't have any problem with the Commons as it is.
I feel like it's not necessarily a town-wide utilized resource, but it's definitely a neighborhood utilized resource.
So for you, it works like a neighborhood park for the bottom end of Putney Road and the Oak Street, Chapin Street neighborhood,
Yeah.
which is perfectly fine.
Because we don't have
But
our
I mean,
own
even
little
beyond
neighborhood
that,
park.
because I think people in my neighborhood use it for, the functions that are there, like the band concerts and whatnot.
Okay.
I tend to agree with Kathy. Like, for me personally, working downtown, if I'm going to meet somebody for lunch, I don't ever think about going there. And I think the traffic pattern has, changed it over the years. I also think, while I know that there's some really beautiful trees in there, it feels very shaded to me.
Yeah.
most of the time, so-
Yeah, and I was more thinking like it's a beautiful area and it's a big area and it could be used even
Yeah,
more.
for the
you know
size
what I
that it
mean?
is, I
And I
think
think it
that's
might be
smart.
used more if there were other additional, like if there were more benches, or if there, if the space was landscaped in slightly different ways in different areas, if, I don't know, if there was a
Tables.
playground structure or.
Water
A
fountain.
fountain.
Right. So I could
Is there a water
see.
fountain
There's not that I know of.
There's no fountain.
there? No fountain.
Is there currently a stage?
Yeah, there's a
There's a
gazebo.
Gazebo.
So.
Which they
But
just
that's like on
rehabbed it.
one far half of it, and then there's a whole other half with just.
When you did your pop-up play, did you use the gazebo or did you just?
Yeah, we used the gazebo.
Right. Did your frisbee ever go down the bank
Yes.
towards the retreat? That's upsetting.
It's an
That's why
adventure.
people have
There's
dogs.
that path that goes down.
Yeah,
and
there's
then the dangerous climbing through prickers to get.
That's right. Okay, I was just checking.
Yeah.
That's,
So it's not the most fun.
actually, that reminds me. I've used the front yard of the retreat itself
Really?
frequently as a frisbee space. Well, Cameron does. So I've ended up there.
I've seen a lot of sled trails going
Yes,
down.
and there are sled trails. In fact, I almost took a kid up on and offered to ride a sled down that slope to the retreat.
Sort
I was
of
on a little bit.
terrifying.
Yeah, right. I did ask. It was pretty good. Anyway, so, okay.
Can we move to the mini, are we moving to the mini park by the fountain now?
No, yes, Wells, here.
Yeah.
Wells, the Wells Fountain outside the courthouse.
I think it would be better used if there were a better demarcation from the courthouse, because I think of it as an accessory to the courthouse, and it's really not. It's a park.
Right.
There were a lot of people walking through it when Pokemon Go came out.
Because
the bird art on the courthouse was a Pokestop.
Okay.
So
That's kinda cool.
there were a lot of people walking through there at that time.
Mhm. It's a very pretty park, but I think
is.
it's
My,
definitely underutilized.
My husband and I were just there, and we were noticing that there's sort of like a stage area there
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
blocked out, but it's not. It's so noisy.
It's really noisy during the day, but I've often thought that it would be a pleasant place to sit, and thought,
Mhm.
I've never seen court staff or anybody else just sort of, go and sit
Yeah.
in the sun and have a
Mhm.
sandwich, but I think it's because it's noisy. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
Not-
I just
it's
think
not
it's-
super pleasant
it's
with all the
associated
cars going by.
with the
Right.
court, and people avoid it.
Well, there's that issue as well.
The
That's the part that was, because I've walked through it and it is
Right.
nice.
also,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there late at night and noticed that some of the trees are make wonderful shelters for
Mm.
sleeping under.
Yes,
Mm.
they're good.
They're beautiful.
Yep. Okay, so
I don't think anybody really uses the lawn of this building.
right,
Which building?
What?
municipal center.
This building.
Oh, right.
Except
they
to
could.
sit on to watch parades.
And it's, very barren, let's
Right.
just say.
Okay.
There was a very cool proposal when we were doing the public art project
There was actually.
to have a book sculpture
Mm.
made out of granite, I think.
Right.
Sitting
Large
on my
enough
lawn.
to sit on.
Sit
Like,
on,
Mhm.
play on.
Lay on. like
Yeah,
a
that would be
sword.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually really
Can't
like
even
it
get
when you
some
come out in the
flowers.
spring and the summer, and you often will see teachers or parents with kids that will be out on the lawn, and I think
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
kind of fun, like, because
Yeah.
they've been at the library, and, I think it is there's potential here.
I think that
Definitely.
that's a good idea, that the library uses and the municipal, something could be done to enliven that area and make more use out of it.
So better connected to the library?
Yes.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if there's the railing along the walkway, like if it actually impedes people's perception of being able to
Yeah.
use the grass.
It definitely.
Isn't
for
there?
me, it did. It's
Yeah,
like
but I think that might
grass
be
is
an
off
ADA
limits.
kind of thing.
Compliant?
If it fails the ADA
I
test.
know it does.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it does.
Because if you hit it,
It's the.
we just wipe it out, and then next thing you're in front of a sausage truck, which could be kind of fun, but. Yeah.
I don't know, well, so maybe there's like what am I trying to say, like maybe there's a slightly different
Right,
design thing or an
exactly.
improvement that would
It's
be
not-
ADA compliant, but would also like somehow open it in a different way to make it more
I
playful.
think one of the stairs themselves are a major barrier to people using the front lawn because they're just so irregular and high. Each step, it's just nuts how bad the steps are.
Unless
Yeah.
you're leaving the kids' floor of the library. Because then you're already above the stairs.
Right, but so I guess this.
I have definitely gone through the library to
Yeah.
avoid those stairs.
Yes, right.
It's true.
So it just seems to me that there's an opportunity to sort of terrace the front yard into more distinct terraces and, do something that would address the steps at the same time. And so rather than thinking about it as the front yard to the municipal centre, if you thought of it as something that's a continuation of the library, you'd get a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to encourage or think
It
about.
would be cool if those stairs were more kid-friendly.
Yeah, the stairs are really horrendous. Yeah.
You just put a slide right down the
Or
front. You got enough.
Some hay bales.
ADA
And the
compliant?
pool.
Yeah, it would make it
Slide?
ADA compliant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right.
interesting.
Yes, okay, so,
Alright.
there's a small garden in front of the Gibson Aiken, which is pretty pleasant, and I don't think
I think that people could make more use out of that.
yes.
It was nice when the
I
fairs-
often
liked
see
when the,
people sitting there eating their
Market
lunch.
was
when
there?
the farmer's market was there. That
Yeah.
was nice.
Right.
Yeah, because there's
Along the
that
side of the
whole
building?
walkway.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
even in the front,
Yep, okay, so you think that,
yeah.
so, is there a programming thing that you can think of that would do it, or you just think it's on?
Yeah, outdoor market, but not necessarily even like a farmer's market, like maybe
Maybe vendors, like.
Well, I
Yeah.
like the farmer's market, but I even just think the very front, there's new benches. I
Yep.
think they're fairly new, but I think just, I think flowers.
Okay,
Just something to make people use it more.
okay. So what's interesting is that side, I don't know what you call it, along the side of the Gibson Aiken, there's that so this is the classic weirdness of this space. So if you're looking at the map, you see this really big L-shaped parcel. There's the Merchant Bank building in the back.
Mhm.
This is a privately held lot that the Merchant Bank building is on. The Merchant Bank building doesn't occupy much space. It's bordered to the north with the parking lot that's in back of Gibson Aiken. Gets stunning views of the river. It's just mind-blowingly good views of the river. And then this whole kind of weird wraparound thing, which is mostly blacktop, is an example
Yes.
of privately held public space, right? So it gets utilized or thought about in different ways by different people at different times of the day. The church itself is a historic structure. It's on the National Register, despite the somewhat odd extension. The front yard of the church is another area where sometimes around this time of year through summer, you'll see kids and their workers playing in the yard. Sometimes, they've got a kiddie pool or a sprinkler or something going. Other times of year, it's a little bit different. So that's another example of a privately held public realm kind of space. So clearly we don't have that much ability to influence the property owners in terms of what's going on there, but some observations about what you think. It's got some nice trees. The grass is in pretty good shape this time of year. So it's a pleasant little green space break. Do people have ideas about it or thoughts about it? And then there's that really amazing lush green grass bank overlooking the river in back that you can access pretty easily.
That
I'm reticent to make suggestions for people on their private land.
Yeah, that's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to get at even an observation about what kind of uses you see those spaces put to at different times, or what your thoughts are about those spaces.
I mean, the river views are fabulous.
Right.
And it's almost like it could be made into an alternative walkway along the river.
Right.
Which I have actually done quite a bit, but you could take this parking lot on Harris Place,
Yes.
and then the parking lot behind the Gibson Aiken, and then you know,
Exactly.
just use that whole
This
thing
is
as an
exactly what I'm
alternative
getting at.
walkway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter used to go to the preschool there, and we would hang out in that green space afterwards.
Right.
But also, yeah, they utilized the front lawn of the church all the time,
I mean,
which was great. I wish like that was open to the public. I wish there was an access point on the sidewalk, but
It's kind of funny. So yes. Yeah,
but it's good that it doesn't, so it can accommodate the kids well.
right, but a slightly different approach could mean that there was just a small gate, you know, just a gate, and that you might feel inclined to go and sit and read a book under the tree or something if there was a bench there. So
I've definitely seen
Yeah,
people on that
yes.
lawn, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure that they're necessarily working in the building. Like, it's hard for me to tell exactly.
I think I've seen some meditative kind of
Yeah.
activities.
One of the things that to me made the backyard less appealing was that it was right up against that parking lot, and it just wasn't
Right.
as pretty. It wasn't as nice to have
Right.
that be right there. So
Right. Okay.
That lot next to, between the River Garden and the Hooker Dunham, used to be a nice little garden. It needs to go back to that purpose.
Yes. So, I can remember when I first got to Brattleboro, there was a couple, I think, that ran a cafe, a seasonal cafe on that deck. It was pretty wild. Not for very long, I don't think. But
There've been food trucks and things.
there's been
back
food
there.
trucks and stuff with there
Yeah.
before, right?
But it's under construction.
Yeah. It is.
exciting.
There's been a couple things that have changed. I think the River Garden doesn't have the access. They don't allow the access to it like it used to be. And then, yeah, there's the construction plywood that's been up for a while that will be changing. I also think it's one of those things, I think out of the the VDAT, the Vermont Downtown
Right.
Action Report, I mean, they talked about possibly pruning back some of the trees because it is actually quite overgrown back there. The
Right.
trees are not as
Right.
good as they have been.
And so actually, that raises a good question. So the trees appear to be located on this this nowhere land between the railroad tracks and the back of the lot. It's not immediately clear to me. I guess it's
Are there
whose parcel it is, basically. In
are
other
there
words,
telephone lines or utility lines there?
yes, there are power lines, huge power lines. So it's
You
not
can
a
get them to trim it.
Yeah, they only know one kind of like approach, but yeah, like at the bottom of the tree. So, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing to explore. Okay, that's good. The other mini park opposite it, before we forget, is Plenty Park. That's the one on with the Thai restaurant.
Mhm. Are we gonna get a new mural?
No. I don't know. I mean, it's not. It's okay.
Is that a
so
suggestion?
Is that a
It
suggestion?
is a suggestion.
Suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Is that a suggestion?
There's a mural in Plenty Park.
There
And
was.
I'm like,
Oh my
what is
God.
it?
Don't bring
On
it
the
up. There
chamber.
was.
There's Thai, and then there's like something.
It's on the chamber. It was on the chamber.
It was on the wall of the Chamber of Commerce.
Can't
Or the-
recall anything.
or the-
It was. How would you describe it, Jessica? You must have grown up with it.
It was like a
It's just
cityscape.
like a cityscape. It was
Right.
a lovely, large
Yeah, bird's eye.
town. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of a bird's eye perspective of Brattleboro. Yeah, and it was the.
Painted over.
So okay, so you'd like up mural?
Yes, I
And-
would.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about the rest of it?
Seems fine.
Seems well utilized.
Yeah.
Seems popular.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very central for.
Okay, so
Stuff to happen.
okay, so let's just so this-
protests and non-protests alike.
Okay. So it's used for protests, and I think it's been. Remember when that TV show thing came through town?
Yeah.
That TV show thing.
Yeah, they gather there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's a gathering place of
Yeah.
a kind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The tree lighting, the.
The
Yeah,
Southern
right.
Vermont Dance Festival.
Yeah, there's
What
concerts
TV show
there.
came by?
Was it the Weather Channel?
I can't remember.
What was it?
Oh, right. What's his name
Oh,
came?
Val Roker.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Today
Today
Show.
Show.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It was at night.
I was
though.
there for
That's
that.
why it
Yeah,
was like.
I'm
Yeah.
on TV, so it's like, I'm sorry. I'm not a popular culture kind of guy.
My brothers went to high school with him.
Really?
Oh.
Wow, there you go. So it's a popular bus stop. People get on and get off the
Excuse
bus
me.
there a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a
Mhm.
lot of activity there of that kind. So that's a good use. That's a little bit different, say, from the Commons, right, or something like that.
I think there's benches and people
Yes.
use it quite a bit.
And there's
Have lunch
shade and there's
Oh, the Morris dancers like it too.
stage area-ish.
That's right. Yes, I've seen
Yeah, it's great.
people perform up against the wall
Mhm.
during gallery walk because you can get a good sound bounce off the wall.
Yeah.
Oh, like
Next
shadow
loud.
puppets?
No, just
Sound.
like you could stand up against the wall and turn your amp up, and that's good. Okay. Anything else about Plenty Park?
It's lovely.
Yeah, good. So before we go further downtown, just going up High Street, there's nothing that comes to mind.
The High Grove lot
There's the High Grove lot.
and the AIDS mural.
Yes, there is that. So, anything about that?
Is this parking lot used to its fullest, or can there be more green space incorporated into it?
I think it definitely could use a little more green space, and it's kind of got since it's so high, it sort of has like a little interesting view over town, you know.
Yes, you get a
So
nice view.
yeah,
But there's not a lot of walking space in that parking lot.
No.
no,
So one of the odder things about it is that there's a sidewalk on the edge of it, which is kind of snapping off on the post office side,
yeah,
and hardly anyone ever. People just walk through the middle of the parking lot because they usually are traversing it from this side to the other side. So they just go in where all the cars go and they just walk in amongst the cars, which has its limits, I can tell you. So Sue and I, for a while, would religiously walk on the sidewalk. We were the only two we ever encountered on the sidewalk, and then we got nervous because it appears as if it's falling
Subsided.
off. So, but one thing you could do, at least in a couple of spots, is sort of have little bump outs and benches.
that's kind of it's like
Yeah.
if you extended that whole area
Right.
and you did some trees along it and some benches around the trees and
Right.
you know, yeah,
So if you
Because it's a
imagine
big lot.
Right. So yeah, exactly. And so if you imagine that this was a beachfront parking
Yeah.
lot, there would be benches looking over the water, right? So you know, you've got this really nice urban setting in the immediate foreground, and you've got this lovely hill in New Hampshire as the background, as the backdrop. It's actually a really pretty spot, and so it seems to be not very well thought out from the standpoint of potential area to meet.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And
that's
part of
true.
the
It might also be nice to have some sitting area around the AIDS quilt mural piece as well, just because it's right up against the parking spaces and doesn't give people who've painted their memories and
Right.
their loved ones' pieces there
So you
room
think
to
that's not
experience that.
So it's not finished for you or something? Okay.
It doesn't feel honored space. It feels like halfway there.
Okay.
There's also something like physically awkward about the buildings that are at the high street end because they almost like jut out, so you
Yes.
kind of lose the sidewalk.
Yes.
I mean, and the rest of the sidewalk is like further back, so it's like if you're coming out, I mean, I can see why people don't use the sidewalk because you sort of have this obstacle you have to get around to get out to High Street anyway, you know.
I've often, yeah. So there's some little storefronts. There's like 2 or 3, and you know they're cool little businesses now. There's like a massage
And they're
place,
online.
and they've been there. They're obviously doing okay. I've often thought that if you eradicated the car parking spaces in front of the storefront and then turned that into some kind of paved area or grass, you could sit there, and then, if one of them turns into a bookstore or
Yeah,
a cafe or something,
yeah,
then
something
you've
like
got
that,
this
like
nice
opening it
natural
up a
little space, right? It just seems to me the justification for having car parking spaces there is not very
Yeah.
strong, and it kind of is a conflict if you're a pedestrian using the actual sidewalk that you're supposed to use.
And if it is green space, it could give them additional area to do their community outreach programs and their workshops and their
Well, like,
burn
what's the
some
one down in
incense.
Harmony Law?
Yeah.
Begins with the M. I wanna
Molly
say.
Sun.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
son. Like, that's kind of nice because it's got the little green
Yeah.
grassy area. Like, you feel
Yeah.
more of a presence. Like those, I know those businesses have been there a long time, but I think those parking spaces right in front of it, and they're probably associated with the buildings, so,
Right.
or with the businesses.
You would have
But
to talk to
they're like right
you.
there, and there's not really a presence of those businesses.
It would change. It would soften that whole corner and change the character of the building quite a bit, actually, if that was made more of a social space on the corner. Yeah. Okay. All right, that's cool. Great. There's the vexing Harmony lot, which is a public-private lot. Part of it's private, part of it's public.
Is that the line?
I wrote down
delineating
vexing.
Yeah, that line is the line. Oh.
Weird.
There might have been a land swap since this was done, so I wouldn't promise that that's the line. But what is important is in the back of the buildings, like Greg's Place, and you see how the parcel lines come out into the lot.
Mhm.
Though that's actually the parcel boundary, so that's private space, and which explains the somewhat erratic car
That makes
parking
for
that goes on there.
a tight driveway out by the bank there.
Right. Right. Well, basically, what you're doing is you're driving over bank property every time you drive out there to go onto Elliott Street. So, I think we don't have it anymore. But at one point in the department, we had this mind-bogglingly good kind of Paris Comes to the Harmony lot treatment, where they turned the whole thing into some sort of Parisian little walled off gardens, and it was all umbrellas and tables and chairs and things. It was really trippy.
When was this?
Must have
Do
been
you
from the
remember?
70s.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the drugs were good. So, and obviously there's not a lot of encouragement for that right now, but this is one of those classic public spaces. Well, first of all, it's public and private combined. It's a little bit different now. I think that the uses of the Brooks House and the limited landscaping that the Brooks House has brought to the area has really changed that corner of the parking lot and made it quite pleasant to sit in and wait for somebody, or to read a book in the sun, or a whole bunch of other things. So those uses are different. There's been some limited effort at programming activity in the tunnel at various times, which
Really?
yeah,
That's cool.
it is cool. And that could be encouraged, I guess. So it's again one of those lots, but it's also gained a little bit of notoriety of late for late night and early morning activities that,
Because there's bars here.
yeah, people just don't necessarily feel very comfortable in the midnight to 5 a.m. time frame necessarily. So it's a kind of a programming problem, but also kind of a design problem.
I think it's a wonderful resource for folks that are out between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. It's a great, Arkham is a very character-driven sort of location, and it's wonderful that they have space. And the music space up above, I guess Maple Leaf's not there anymore.
Is
but
it Headspace?
The
Is Headspace still going?
Headroom
Headroom?
Stages is still going, and you can hear the music from down in the parking lot. And
So you don't have to go out. That's enough.
it's really cool. It's a
Okay.
really cool thing to have late at night in the parking
Okay.
lot, and I think that we can't forget that it serves varying demographics.
Right. Okay. That's good.
There's also something intriguing to me about Green Street and its vantage point above that.
Yes.
And I feel like someone with a more creative mind than mine, there could be some sort of connection between the Harmony lot and like Green Street. I don't know. And then you come around Green Street and you got the little bitty
Bungee-
park
a
over
bungee
there.
jump.
I don't know.
So is it here where the park is, or is it here?
It's right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, I think it's one of those moments where there's kind of a lost opportunity to put benches or something. So yes, if you or stairs.
Yeah.
Right, on
And-
Green Street, you get this stunning view into the Harmony lot, and the back of the Brooks House and these other buildings is actually really kind of cool.
What about just a little bit north in that little crescent near Shriners Hall? Is that public or private?
It's their lawn, I think, right?
It's not a lawn, it's blacktop.
Yeah.
The whole thing's blacktop.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
The skateboarders like it. The Shriners hate that the skateboarders like it. It's what happens when you blacktop something. It's like,
Do the Shriners?
They don't hate.
So
The
this
Shriners
Look,
exist?
I'm-
How many people are?
That's where they practice.
yeah.
So this Church Street, Green Street thing goes all the way down where that retaining wall was fixed? Is that-
Yeah,
is that what that
basically.
is?
Yes, and there's a little pocket park that's not marked here opposite the firehouse, more or less, right? So there's
Yeah.
there's a nice stone retaining wall, and there's
Yeah.
a nice little spot there.
Benches.
But
Yeah.
does it feel a little isolated to folks?
My
Maybe it
husband
could be
and daughter
brought all
use it all the
Can it be
time.
brought all the way
Good.
down to Elliott? That looks vacant there. Is that where the cleaners used
Well,
to be?
the cleaners are on the
Cleaners are
corner,
there.
and you wouldn't want to lick that in a hurry.
I think it's partly that there's no amenities, right? You got
Right.
it's like there's the firehouse, and then you've got people's houses, right? So, it's not kind of centralized. So yeah, I think it is maybe a little isolated, just in that it's kind of facing. You have downtown, and it sort of faces out of downtown.
My husband and daughter, he would pick her up at school. They'd walk down to the Indo-American grocer and then eat their snack up in the
Up
park.
there.
Sounds really cute.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Right.
So there
But
might
nobody
be
else
some
thought of that.
potential. I mean, if you're having a report where people are looking into this, it'd be great.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes all it needs is just a little bit of attention, like you program an activity or an event there. So take, gallery walk as an example. Instead of everyone trying to focus on Main Street, get a little bit off the beaten path and try and organize something that would happen in that park, like a poetry slam or something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a physical reworking of the space or a land use-y kind of thing that I'm thinking of here. It's just more to try and figure out what is the existing level of activity there, what would fit or suit there, and how could you generate interest in the space. I agree that if you could get the corner of the dry cleaning lot as well, then that would be really fun. Or if there was any redevelopment of the dry cleaning site, it would be really nice to see it
Incorporate that.
that, right?
And I wonder
So-
if there's that's where one of the water cures was, right? So it'd be interesting to see some sort of like historical,
Right.
artistic,
A marker or a plaque
Yeah.
or something, exactly. So even
Or
that,
a water
or
fountain.
a water fountain, or some sort of
Yes,
fountain.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking, how we were talking about an alternative walkway going from Harris Place down.
You
I
think
guess,
it
to
can
the
go all the
bank?
way to here, or does these buildings make it impossible?
I don't know.
You
But-
can leave me your map, because
Yes.
it's nicely annotated.
But I was thinking if you went all the way across to, I forgot the name of this parking lot.
Oh, Hyde Grove.
That you could have an alternative walkway going from that sidewalk
Mhm.
across High Street. I don't know what's here. And then, the Shriner.
Yep.
And then down to here. It's kind of like, it's opposite this on
Yeah.
both sides of
These
town.
are like, there's all houses, and isn't
Yeah,
this where
is it-
Steve lives? Like in
Yeah.
here somewhere? Right, so that seems like this
Right,
whole area
it's-
seems very
Yeah.
private.
Well, I
know.
like the idea of this High Grove lot. Because
Right.
you guys.
Well, I've walked to Elliott Street quite a bit.
Mhm.
I go High Grove to Green, down Church.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
great. So instead of that, it could just be here and just some.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Yeah.
Such a steep hill.
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, steep hills.
But
I always
then
go
you get
through the
nice-
tunnel.
But then you get the nice view.
Yeah, you get a view.
Oh.
Depends
Right.
on where I'm going.
Right.
Like, I don't always do it, but I do like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting questions is the so-called Green Street extension that goes from the bend there where the Shriners are down to High Street. It doesn't get a lot of traffic, really. I mean, it's probably
It's
got,
one way.
it's got emergency service function and those kinds of things, but it could be interesting to sort of activate that more as a pedestrian kind of path
Mm-hmm.
of some kind. Okay, so there's a little green pocket in front of the transportation center that's a little like a jungle between about July and October, and then there's snow lands on it, and then they push the snow, I think, off the top deck of the transportation center.
Where are
onto
you
it.
talking
You're
about?
talking here?
That's way down, isn't it?
No, it's
Talking by
between,
McNeil's or by the?
it's between 118. As you're walking along the sidewalk here,
Oh, okay.
this right here between 118 and the entrance to the transportation center.
Is he
there's
talking
this-
about here?
It's this
a
almost
jungle?
sheer. It's just this sheer, almost. It's like this, and it's just
Yeah.
got junk growing on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but it's steep. I wouldn't consider that green space.
Yeah, green space,
Yeah.
steepness can be
You can do
engineered.
Yeah, you could do something different with it, right?
And with that chain link
And
fence.
it's municipal property, right?
It's
So that's your point,
yes,
that it's
exactly.
municipal property.
So for instance, when I talked with Kate, when Casey was at the meeting, we talked about her walk home. She said
Right.
she particularly didn't like that stretch because
Yeah.
it was like running the gauntlet for her. It's like from the entrance to the parking garage to here was really problematic.
That's where you speed up.
That's
Never
where you
mind
speed
the
up,
bars
right?
that are
And
there
so
all
what
the
I was
murders that happen there, it's the chain link fence.
right, you can throw somebody over the fence and that's the end of it. All right, so you're never going to come back. So the idea would be to try and think of ways in which you could do something with that space that was going to reduce that sensation of
A cliff being
cliff,
like
and
thrown off
also
a
one-
cliff, like a
a
like
Yeah.
a
Widening the
rinky-dink
sidewalk,
little chain
giving
link
it
some
fence
more
saving you
lighting,
from
yeah.
the cliff.
Because
Yeah.
as we discussed in these little
Yeah.
comments, steep slopes can be engineered.
right. So it just seems to me like an unfinished pocket or corner. that-
Yeah, it's kind of like a forgotten little area.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other
There
side.
used to be buildings there.
Right. And the other side of the transportation center down on Flat Street has the same problem. There's a little grassy, incredibly steep verge immediately on the western end of the transportation center, which is the other side of the same problem, basically.
Right.
Right? So,
Hmm.
And that's,
Okay, I like that. Good
is
idea.
that the backyard
What is
of
the
one of
idea?
those buildings?
just
Solar panels.
Well,
Stuff
no.
some solar panels
No, no,
in
no.
there. I
Just
don't
like-
know. You
just-
just-
a garden
just
or a
garden it,
park.
or just do something
Yeah.
different so that that it functions in some other way.
Because it needs to break up this whole like angry bar scene at 2 a.m.
Is there like some art or something?
That's what I'm wondering, like, is there some kind
I-
of light,
I
kind of
say
cool
say it
lighting
with
installation?
flowers.
You could just terrace it dramatically and then plant it, or you could do things with lights. You could do things with moving water. You could manage the storm. You could manage.
Water there.
You could manage the
That's
water coming
there.
off the parking garage,
That's West Hop area too.
and there's all sorts of things you can do.
You could put a musical interactive art piece there.
Yes, you could.
Oh,
There you
that'd be
go.
so nice. It was real
A
loud.
very
and kept everyone
no,
awake at
no,
night.
a very soothing one. There aren't houses there.
Yeah.
Not right there.
Some apartments on the lake.
Just not wind chimes, all right?
Across from the fire station. They've got the fire station. That's loud.
Yeah. Those
What are they
guys-
going to complain about?
Those guys are deaf anyway, so don't worry about it. Oops.
All right.
It's an obligation.
Okay, so you got another parking lot on.
So just around the transportation center, I think. So let's come down to let's start now. Let's come down to the transportation center. We've got that funny little triangle of land on the corner of formed by Flat and Elm, and I don't know what that little thing is called.
It's
You know,
considered flat. It's
Is
weird.
it?
I think so.
Well, there's
think it's-
private
It's
homes
not
it's
there,
an incredibly
right?
not flat part of Flat Street.
Yeah.
And there's that new Polish
That's
Yeah.
right, the Polish.
place right in
Yeah,
that
that's
little
right.
crotch of
Yes,
Beach Road.
exactly. Right. So that's kind of a fun space, and it's again one of those examples of privately held land that's kind of quasi-public.
And Stanfest has happened there
Yes, Sandfest happens there every year.
every year.
What is that?
It's,
Stand in line has a band turn up and they perform on the back of an 18-wheeler trailer, and
Oh, yeah.
we block the street, and
And it's fun.
people
That's
turn up with
fun.
really cool motorcycles, and everyone checks out their motorcycles and dances to the band. It's really good.
Yeah.
Well.
So okay, so that's an area that I think I'm not sure that little triangle seems to me to be something that
I think that and the parking lot that's on that street
yeah.
need to be examined in light of what's been planned along the whetstone pathway.
You mean the parking
Yeah.
lot for CF Church or
No, the town one.
The town one.
The other side of
okay,
Elm.
okay. Oh, okay, this one. Right.
And similarly, this one on Elm Street.
Okay. All right, so the transportation center itself, the lobby to the transportation center has recently received a mural. There's that little laneway between the transportation center and what used to be the Snell, what we call the Snell building. That was because it was the last use of that building, and they were the owners as well.
Yeah,
There's
that
art
is a,
installation.
And there's the art installation on the side of the transportation center, which also works on the side of the so-called Snell building. So there's that little laneway, which is sort of an interesting pocket, and then there's the transportation center itself. It's a busy place at different times of the day, and it's I think it's a focal point, a meeting place for people certain times of the day and certain times of the week. Anything that people want to say about how that space is managed or how it could be managed in a different way?
Yes.
Yes?
I think it needs to be better managed and managed a little more user-friendly, pedestrian-friendly way.
Okay.
I feel like, you know, what could or what might happen with the Snell building could have a major effect on like that whole area there,
Yeah.
depending
Yes.
on if,
Same with the Dominican law.
right, if there's someone really, you know, something interesting that moved in there or started to use the street in a different way or,
Yes.
you know, and it's such a cool, old, interesting building.
It's a great idea.
It really is.
Is there
Make a great municipal center.
is there any way that the town would get involved with the development of that?
The normal tools that we would use for something like that is historic tax credits. If they're still in existence after September, community development block grants, either in the form of loans, or, you know, either a loan or a grant. The town would be part of that package and cash in of its own, depending on the intended end use. And the developer and or owners could utilize the small business assistance program, which has got a limit of 70 grand on it, which people typically use for restaurant fit outs in town. That's the most common use for that program. And then, the state could, there would be other stuff from the state, but historic tax credits and that kind of thing is you could probably get almost $1 million there. And so because the town has a designated downtown, that's in it, it qualifies. So there's actually quite a bit of soft public money that could be deployed to redevelop that building. We would put it through the Brownfield program. So, yeah, be all right. It's a nice building.
It'd be cool as like a concert hall or a dance hall or like a, you know, dance studios or something.
Well, there used to
Artist
be
studios,
a nightclub
yeah.
in the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, there's still stories around about that. Actually, Dennis Smith used to run that nightclub. The guy that owns the marina.
Oh.
Yeah, how's that? And it used to be on some national route. It was like a big scene.
Hmm.
Okay, so crossing the street, the Preston lot where the big P is, and the little bridge across the Whetstone to the co-op parking lot. Those of you, children, I'm not sure if you saw the work that we did associated with the, we did it with the EPA. There was we talked about it earlier tonight, the charrette that kind of reconceived this whole neighborhood and turned that parking lot into a kind of a...
I don't think I was at that.
Okay, we should probably show you something from that work so that you've got an idea of what we're talking about. I think, Jessica, you know about it, right?
No.
No? Okay. So we obtained support from the EPA Smart Growth Office and received a funded charrette process that ran last summer. Last June. And we looked at the area from Main Street, the corner of Main Street and Flat Street, basically. Further out from this map, following the Whetstone Brook. So what we tried to encourage, what the consultant team did was made up of 3 different firms, and it straddled landscape architecture, stormwater management, and what was the third discipline? There were two different landscape architecture firms and a stormwater management team. And what we're trying to, and so the most westerly end of it is the big banana-shaped parcel, 250 Bird Street that we were talking about before, which is basically open space. And the easterly end of it was where the Whetstone crosses underneath Main Street there. And so the idea was to reconceive of this neighborhood from the standpoint of climate change. So making the Whetstone more resilient and making the community more resilient to flooding from the Whetstone, and then turning the Whetstone into more of an amenity than it currently is. So it kind of operates a bit like a drain through this part of town. And so the idea was to actually improve public access to the Whetstone, get some more community pride in it as a stream, as a water body, and clean it up, and have more public oversight of it because there'd be more activity programmed along the edge of it on both sides. So called for pathways on both sides, and then turning around some of those buildings so that there would be cafes or spaces like that overlooking the brook at the back of the CF Church building. And the Preston lot, which is that surface parking lot opposite the transportation centre, being turned into a small public park shaped like an amphitheatre. So under flood conditions it would fill up with flood water and reduce the velocity and pressure of the water on the latches and buildings, the historic structures immediately downstream. And the rest of the time it would act as a kind of an amphitheatre, as a hangout space, and not be a parking lot. But, so one of the things that we've asked the parking consultant to do is to study the use of that lot and figure out whether it needs to stay as a parking lot or whether in fact it could become a park.
And we're in the, or you're, they're in the middle of that, assessing that right now?
They're they're about to start.
Sorry, okay.
And so the Preston lot, I don't know, it's probably caters to about 30 or 40 cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a popular parking space. It sort of acts as an overflow for the co-op and overflow for the Latches, particularly when people go to the movies at the Latches or Latches is busy. So to take it out of parking and put it into open space would be politically, and from a planning standpoint, kind of a big ask. But yeah, right, you've got it right, Jessica. But
the parking garage is right across the street.
That's right, the parking garage is right across the street.
And there's also the parking at the the CF Church building, which, you know, is
Right.
just a little bit further out and is in the evening.
Is it used?
You could lease it.
How is Dunkley's fitting into the vision for that?
Right now, he's fine.
All right.
Yeah, it's all cool. Lester's all right. Yep. That's definitely a historic structure.
Yeah.
It's a historic use, and there's no one really eager to see anything change there. It's up to Lester, I guess. It doesn't seem to be wanting to go anywhere either, so it's all right.
Sort of back to the conversation at the, talking about uses for this area. Just ones that have stuck out in my mind have been the Flat Street Rising
Yes.
event that happened
Yes.
after the flood.
Yep.
But also the on-street cleanup that happened just a few days or a couple of weeks after the flood. The street was closed off
Yep.
from, I think, the transportation center down.
Yep.
And people were out on the street with their muddy stuff, hosing it down and going through things, and it was sad, but it was also beautiful to see how the community was all out in the street participating in that process, and it was nice to have this space
To do it.
to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Somewhat interestingly, there are these portable technologies now. Basically, it's weird. They're big. Basically, you fill them up with water, which is odd given that they then control flood water. So they're like big tubes, like higher than a table. And you fill them up with water with a fire truck before the flood comes, and you can use them to block where the water is going to come. And they were proposing to do that across the street, just west of Dunkley's.
Like a water sandbag.
So like a sandbag, but full of water. And that would leave that end of Flat Street dry, hopefully, with a few other measures to make sure that the water didn't make its way up onto Flat Street itself. So that people would be able to use the parking garage as a place to store things in their cars under flood conditions. And then get in and out relatively easily, which would be an improvement over what happened during Irene.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we doing for time? Really quickly, let's talk about the food co-op parking lot, which contains some interesting landscaping effort for stormwater management. Anything else that you think happens there? Is it a hangout space? Is it a meeting space? We talked about the edge of it a little bit before.
I don't think the parking lot is so much as the pathway.
The pathway.
Yeah, I think the
Pathways,
pathway
for
is
sure.
really well utilized. Like there's
Right.
a lot,
Okay. Anything that you change or rearrange?
I think we need some of those cool tree wells for any of the trees that are there, so it's
Okay.
like infiltrating the stormwater. And, like, I feel like the lower part of Main Street is not green at all, and so
Right.
any opportunity to
Pretty
do
hard
that
to get.
you know.
Okay.
I like the garden boxes that are in there,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I feel like one year there were some edibles in them.
Yeah,
Yep.
there are now.
There are now.
Edible
That's
breakfast.
fantastic. I love that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's cool. Okay.
And then the waterfront.
Yep. That's where we're going to end up.
And the bridge. You're going to tell us what happened with the bridge meeting? You're not at liberty to say.
Yes, I am at the liberty
well, we
to
could
say.
talk about that little mini park too, which
Oh, yeah.
I think the problem there is the traffic
Yeah.
around,
Yes.
the intersection is so formidable.
So in front of the cow
Holstein,
place?
yeah.
The Holstein?
Yeah.
It's got a name, and it's escaping me right now.
There was that nice willow garden
Yes.
thing in there.
And it was definitely a more peaceful place to hang out with the block there for the traffic noise and,
Yes.
and smells and.
So that's one of those interesting things. So it obviously doesn't work very well as a place. It's not a refuge, right? But it can still function as an open space and still can be programmed if you give up on the idea of it being a refuge, then it could be a focal point for other things. Like, so you could have a really wild sculpture there, you could do
Right.
other things, right? So something that if you drove or walked past, you could look at it, but it's not the place, it's not a destination-y sit-down place, right? So-
Here's a question about that though.
Right.
Do you want drivers to have a distraction?
Yes.
At
that
that
point,
intersection?
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
One more is not going to make any difference to performance, let's face it. So that would be, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to think about how to program a space that was still open space and still public and still had a function, but it wasn't necessarily meant to be like a park.
It'd be a really cool place for large-scale, well-lit installation art.
Right.
Right, which you almost think it's right across the street from the museum, so
Exactly.
it's like, it's almost
So
like if the museum
give it
just
to
had
the-
permission to
give
like,
it to the museum to
as an
to do
installation
something with.
space, yeah. And I mean, like, give
I
it,
mean, yeah.
but provide permission, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. So figure something out that's gonna.
Don't
be-
use the word give and.
Right.
yeah, like a 20-year lease of $1, whatever, to like
Oh, no,
create,
no.
to, I mean, whatever.
I'm thinking like a season,
Season,
have
yeah.
an installation.
Right.
The part of the problem is right now the way it's set up is that you're not going to see anything
Yeah.
unless you knock stuff down. Like
Yeah.
I'm talking about doing it over.
Dear museum, give us a plan and a vision for the space.
It'd be interesting if they had some
I
sort
don't
of like,
think that's a good idea.
if the museum sponsored a competition,
Right.
like a
Well,
design competition
the
on
Wicked-
like
the
what
Wicked thing was
kind
a
of interesting
museum
things.
sponsored thing. That was an installation.
Yeah.
actually. So I mean, I guess that's fine.
But like I think about that Nashua presentation
Right.
that we heard last year at the planning conference. You know,
Right.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be the museum. They could be a good partner, but
Right.
maybe.
Doesn't have to be the museum. That's true. Just
I wouldn't want to cede control of a municipal park to any other entity but the town. And offering it
So
to a
just
variety
invite-
of groups to program it
Right.
on a, different seasons and
Yeah,
different
that's cool.
times.
We can do that. That'd be great.
Or the rec department could partner with
Right,
different
exactly.
organizations to program it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Okay.
think that would be appealing if there was some administrative support from the town to
Yes.
execute that programming.
Yes. So, taking your life in your hands and jumping across the street, going down Bridge Street to Depot Street, the so-called green space, which now has big granite slabs and an art installation at the end of the archery building. So that's pretty good, and we've cleaned up the riverbank.
I saw people sitting there looking at the view just the other day.
Yeah, it's really popular. It seems to be pretty successful. Yeah.
It would be cool if there were a stage on that space,
Mm-hmm.
an elevated stage.
Okay. Okay, that's excellent.
Or a stage down the slope towards the water. I know there's
Ooh, I
it's
don't know
very
about that.
weird and steep and
Okay.
stuff, but
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we've been freaked out about that, but okay.
I feel
Okay.
like there really needs to be a plan for that park, or that green space.
Definitely.
It's really underutilized. It's much
It's
better.
not programmed
since-
very
No.
intensively?
No.
Okay.
And I just think there could be a little piece
Even-
of it that
even a
is more
sign.
hardscaped, and then, just, there could be so much more going on down there, and I think that part of it involves solving the archery building, what's gonna become of that.
Right.
I
It's a
also
missed
think-
opportunity. It's much improved through the river to river.
Right.
Like, ever since I moved here, I'll walk down and look at the river and stop and then go back home. And something has to bring people like me to the next stop of going to this new space. Even because it's really difficult to cross the street here.
Yep. Yep.
So that needs to be worked out.
is there
Just
just
as-
the one access point down to it?
Well, to cross
Basically, yeah.
to cross from Main Street to the museum, you're supposed to go across to the co-op and down by the mini park and cross again and go to the museum. Well, I'm exhausted by that. So, I mean, that's like a little pedestrian roundabout. And if there were another way, I mean, you could go straight down.
Well, there's no sidewalk along the side of it.
But
So if you're
there's-
going down to the waterfront, you want to stay on the northern side.
On the northern side where
Yeah.
there is a sidewalk.
Because there is
Yeah.
no sidewalk on the museum.
Right.
Side, but
There's a sidewalk that's this way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really
I've walked it.
tiny. Yeah.
I usually cross.
So, part and parcel of enlivening this park is figuring out pedestrian walkway along
Excellent.
this whole malfunction junction.
Right. Well, so let me give you, as quickly as I possibly can, things have come a little bit unstuck with the bridge project. So it was an assumption, an operating assumption of the engineers from both New Hampshire DOT and VTrans, that when they built the new bridge, which would be south of the Marlborough Graduate Center and hit Vernon Street or Route 142, that they would give the bridge, there's actually two bridges across the Connecticut River now, one to that island and then one from the island across to New Hampshire. That the town of Hinsdale in New Hampshire and the town of Brattleboro would welcome becoming the new owners of those two bridges and undertake their maintenance, even though the proposal was to have them as bike and pedestrian bridges. This is.
And did you tell them what happens when they assume?
I gave that information to other people who attended the meeting, and I think that they translated it into slightly kinder words. Nevertheless, what we've done is send a letter to VTrans saying we're not really interested in taking on the old bridge without any state support for doing that, and we're not really thrilled about owning the maintenance responsibilities for the new bridge, given that it actually doesn't service anything in Brattleboro. It's basically a flyover to the point where it becomes New Hampshire. And the latest indication from VTrans is that they will not be buying the tank farm to make the new bridge possible. They'll just be signing an easement agreement with the existing property owner so that they could build the bridge right over the tank farm. And it would call for the relocation of a couple of small tanks, and that's all which they would undertake to do. So it somewhat changes the whole conception of what would be happening on the waterfront for us. So we've conveyed our disappointment to VTrans.
So what do you mean by flyover? Like where would it end?
It would end at 142, but as you can see, so you see here, this is Route 142, Vernon Street is here.
Mhm.
The new bridge would come slicing through this building here, right at the bottom here,
Mhm.
and land here. And
Mhm.
so you wouldn't be able to like drive off the bridge and access anything in Brattleboro. Once you get on the bridge, next stop is New Hampshire, right? So from the standpoint of the town, it's not benefiting the town that much. And then, so we would be responsible for the maintenance, particularly snow plowing of the sidewalks on the new bridge from this point all the way to this point, which is when it becomes New Hampshire. And the state was also assuming that we would bear this cost because we'd be so happy to have this new
State of
bridge.
Vermont?
Yes. So there's been some we've sent a letter. That's it. That's all I know. But we were operating with an assumption that went back years that this land use was incompatible with the new bridge, and therefore this was a major redevelopment opportunity. But it now appears as if this is wrong-headed on that part.
And similarly with the abandoned bridge.
The abandoned bridge
Municipal
may still happen. It
responsibilities.
may still happen that that turns in. If the new bridge is constructed, and we're assuming that it will be, then this will become a biped bridge. The town of Brattleboro's position and the town of Hinsdale's position is that they would rather have the bridge deck removed than be responsible for maintaining it. If this new bridge has bike and pedestrian accommodations, which by federal law is required to have. It's a kind of a textbook example of really good forward planning stretched out over 30 years of everyone talking to themselves and not to each other. And what happens when you let communities make decisions.
Well, on that note.
Okay, any suggestions for that bit? All right, I think we captured
Let's
everything.
call for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.